This story takes place many, many years ago, prior to World War II, in the German Alps. Henry Frankenstein and his assistant steal dead bodies from the cemetery. Some of them are the bodies of criminals. They plan to put the parts together to make a new person and bring it to life using electricity from their laboratory. All they're missing is a brain. So Dr. Frankenstein's assistant goes to steal a brain and steals it from a professor who is showing two brains to his class, a good brain and a criminal brain. Even though the assistant steals the good brain, it gets ruined, and so he has to take the criminal brain. Professor Waldman is the teacher who the brain was stolen from. He also happens to be Dr. Frankenstein's old professor. He is not aware that the brain has been stolen. Dr. Frankenstein is engaged to a woman named Elizabeth, who goes to Dr. Waldman for help, being concerned about her fiancé always being stuck in that laboratory, always keeping everything secret, and he won't tell her what it's about. Dr. Waldman says he's trying to create a new human being. Dr. Waldman and Elizabeth show up at Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory, where he and his assistant had just assembled the new body and brain from the parts and have it laying on a table. At that time, the lightning comes in from a storm, bringing the creature to life. Although Frankenstein's new creation, who I will refer to as the monster, is horrible and scary looking, he is obedient and seems to be very simple-minded. When Dr. Frankenstein asks the monster to sit down, he does. The assistant comes into the room holding a torch, which scares the monster. So Dr. Frankenstein and Professor Waldman chain him up. The assistant holds a torch up to the monster and gets killed by the monster. Hearing the screams from the other room, Dr. Frankenstein and Professor Waldman come into the room and see what has happened. They manage to trap him and give him a very powerful sedative, and he passes out. Dr. Frankenstein, his father, and his fiancée Elizabeth leave to go home, but Professor Waldman stays behind to destroy the monster. As he's getting ready to do this, the monster comes alive and kills Professor Waldman. The monster escapes the laboratory and is walking around the countryside when he sees a little girl who asks him to play with her. They start throwing flowers into the water, and then he picks her up and throws her in, causing her to drown. Dr. Frankenstein and Elizabeth are getting ready to be married, but they are just waiting for Professor Waldman to arrive, when another gentleman comes and said that Professor Waldman has been found dead. Dr. Frankenstein has a very strong feeling that it was the monster that did it. A moment later, he hears a scream coming from Elizabeth's room where she was getting ready for the wedding. They go in there to see her passed out. She had fainted on the bed. It was the monster who frightened Elizabeth, causing her to faint. At this point, Dr. Frankenstein knows that the monster had escaped. A moment later, you see the father of the little girl who drowned, holding her dead body, walking down the street, at which point the villagers all decide to go after the monster. The villagers go after the monster with torches. Meanwhile, the monster captures Dr. Frankenstein and ends up throwing him off the roof of the tower, badly injuring him, but he's still alive. While some of the villagers are tending to his wounds and helping him, the rest of them burn the whole tower and the laboratory down, killing the monster. The final scene in the movie is a happy one, with Dr. Frankenstein's father toasting and congratulating him for his wedding. There have been several sequels to this movie, and the ones that were made in the early days are very good. The ones that were made in modern times, I'm showing my age again, I personally did not find them good at all, but you might. There are more movies coming up, old-time movies coming up in the next few days, so stay tuned, but just remember one thing. If they're in color now, it's because they were colorized after the fact, but they still retain their spooky flavor. See you next time. Love you. Bye-bye.